Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back for another session. Today we're going to look at being absolved from the prayer and the legal consequences of not praying. So our author says, if a sick person who was unable to perform prayers by head motions or was unable to fast dies. So here what we mean by a sick person is someone who's paralyzed or who's at the extent of his sickness where he can no longer utter anything or he can't even pray by head movements. In this case, he doesn't pray. If he dies in this state, or if a traveler dies on his journey, then it is not necessary for either one of them to stipulate payment fidya on behalf of those missed prayers or fasts in their will. So if these two categories die while in this state, then if they die upon not praying or not fasting, they don't need to stipulate the fidya for this, the compensation, the ransom for this. They don't need to do this. Why? Because a sick person, the obligation of praying has been lifted upon him, and one who's traveling, again, his fasting is not obligatory for him anymore. If he fasts, it's better for him, but if he doesn't, it's not obligatory, and he only makes them up when he is a resident again. So in this situation, if George was traveling for 10 days and he stayed in a particular place for 5 days and then moved on and stayed for another 4 days, he's considered a traveler. As such, the obligation for him to make up his fast doesn't fall upon him until he's back home in his place of residence, and then he needs to make them up. If in this state he dies, then he doesn't need to stipulate a payment as a ransom for making up those fasts. Why? Because had he have lived, he would have known about this and he would have prayed, he would have fasted his due. Likewise for the one who's sick, had he become healthy, he would have made up those missed prayers. So because he was not given the opportunity to get healthy, then likewise he doesn't need to pay the fidya. This ruling is on the condition that the sick person does not get better before dying, or that the traveler did not reside at a place for 15 days or more before dying, as just mentioned. If they are able to pray or fast, i.e. by the sick getting better or by the traveler residing, and they did not yet make up what was missed, then they must stipulate payment in their will. So what the author is referring to here is that now they have the ability, right? So these two examples here, or any other example of someone who hasn't prayed his whole life and he's come to the last stage of his life now and he realizes he needs to pray and he needs to make up for missed prayers, he can leave a will. He can leave a will, and he can stipulate in that will every single prayer that he didn't make, pay the compensation, the fidya for that. And what is the fidya? The author says, the payment fidya is half a sa of wheat. This is approximately between 1.7 kg and with a maximum of 2.2 kg. Our author's chosen this figure here. You could say 2 kg. 2 kg is a good figure. 2.2 kg was put into this book due to the way it was taught by the author of this book, i.e. the English translator of this book. He chose the figure he taught the figure 2.2. You can average it out as 2 kg. And if it was barley or dates, then it would be 4.4 kg, or its equivalent in cash for each missed prayer, including the witr. So that would be 2.2 times 6 for 1 day's missed prayers. For your 5 prayers, and the 6th is your witr. For each missed day of fasting also. And this money is to be taken out of a third of his wealth before division of inheritance. So what the author means here is when someone dies, he has an estate. So George has died, bless him, and he has left his estate. A third of that is for his own self. He can dispose of a third of it as he wishes. He can give it to a pet charity, he could give it to his best friend, he could send it to his pen pal abroad. That's entirely up to him. But 2/3 of it, there are other people that have rights over that inheritance and it becomes due to them. So that money cannot be touched. But from the third of his wealth that was at his own disposal even after death, from that the money is taken out. And if, having taken all the money out which is stipulated in his will, if his prayers, there was still some prayers left, then it would be taken out from the rest of his estate. So in a case like this, everything, it's technically possible for everything he owns to go towards charity. His entire estate can be wiped out in paying off his debt to Allah regarding the prayers and the fast he didn't do. So if his wali or another voluntary pays on his behalf, then it is valid for the amount that is due. If a third of the deceased's wealth is not sufficient for what he owns of fidya, then his wali is to pay the fakir, poor person, with intention of fidya and kafara. Then he takes back what he paid, and the equivalent amount of prayers or fast will have dropped from the deceased person's responsibility. Okay, kafara here is an expiation. This means if he's broken an oath, or there's other expiations that we look at further on. But if you make an expiation and you break it, then if you make an oath and you break it, then you have to pay the legal consequences for this, which is different than the fidya, which is like a ransom for deeds that you, the obligatory deeds that you didn't do, such as fasting and worship. So when the author says here, if a third of the deceased wealth is not sufficient for what he owns of fidya, then his wali is to pay the fakir with the intention of fidya and kafara. Then he takes back what he paid, and the equivalent amount of prayers or fast will have dropped. Right? This seems a bit strange. You give someone money and then you take it back. Right? Previously I mentioned that his entire estate can be wiped out, and now Imam Shah Nabulullah is saying that you can give the money, the equivalent, and then take it back. What he's actually referring to here is a very beautiful act of an understanding between the person you're paying, and ultimately it goes down to servitude and bowing before your Lord and understanding the obligations that are upon you and helping to discharge and ease the burden of the one who's trying to ease his burden, right? So it's an act of charity from the one who you're giving charity to, right? So what's intended here is George has not prayed, say, a year of prayer, and it amounts to, for example, £2,000. It amounts to £2,000. The wali, or the executioner of the will, the one who's entitled to something, goes with that money that he's taken out of the estate, which has been earmarked to be given to poor people, with the intention that you're paying off his ransom, his fidya. So you go to this old person and then you say to him, you basically give him the 2,000, and he gives it back to you. And then as he says, look, I've given this back to you, I've accepted what you've given me, now I'm gifting you back something, right? I'm gifting something back to you. And then you take the 1,000 back, and then you pay him the 1,000. So he's given you 1,000 back, and then you've paid him the 1,000. So you've basically paid off 2,000 with only 1,000, right? So he's actually given you something, right? Did I make myself clear there? You basically give 1,000. He gives you 1,000 back, and then he gives you 2,000 back. He says, I've accepted your gift. Now I'm gifting it back to you, and then you give him 1,000. Right? This is what it means. It is valid to pay the fidya all at once to a poor fakir person, as opposed to kafara for breaking an oath or the like, for which one must distribute the payment to multiple recipients. So if it's kafara in this situation, for example, if you break an oath, you have to feed 10 people 2 meals a day, right? So say it costs around £2 or £4 to feed a person. You don't feed that one person for 10 days. Right? You would find 10 people and spread that money across 10 people and feed 10 people 2 square meals a day at the average of whatever you eat from yourself. But when it comes to the fidya, you can pay one person. This is where we mentioned that you give a lump sum to someone, he gives it back to you, and then you give him some back. One may not pray on behalf of someone else, i.e. it will not count for the other person, and will not reduce the fidya amount of his misprayers. So this is opposed to, for example, the Hajj, where you can do a voluntary Hajj for someone, or if somebody is genuinely from old age or sickness, he cannot perform the Hajj, he can pay someone money to perform the Hajj on his behalf. When it comes to the prayers, you cannot do this. You cannot perform prayers on behalf of anybody else. The fidya is to be paid only to poor people, while Allah will overlook the sins of His dead servant by His limitless grace. Now the author moves on to the punishment and the legal consequences of those who abandon the prayer. First of all, it must be understood that prayer is a tremendous pillar of Islam, right? It's one of the foundational pillars upon which the edifice of Islam is built upon. And to remove any one pillar that is a foundational pillar will weaken the structure. So what does a person have left if you've taken the pillar of salah away from you, and then you're doing everything else, right? And salah, which is one of the pillars from the five, is a skeleton amongst itself. It's a huge structure amongst itself. Everything else fits. It's like the grand pillar and everything else fits around it, right? And then this fits into the five pillars of Islam. It's a huge act of submission. It's one of the strongest signs of being a Muslim. And a place that has a mosque and you can hear the call to prayer is a place that everybody knows is a Muslim place. And it's a place that is manawwar, it's light, it's illuminated, and the blessings of Allah descend. And to stop praying, or to stop people from praying, or to stop giving the adhan, or to stop making mosques, it's a huge corruption in Islam, and Islam will try to stem this and curb this. And how does Islam do this? And why does it do it? We just mentioned why it does it. One of the reasons also is that by somebody not praying, if George decides not to pray, but publicly he prays. Now we're talking about an idealistic Islamic society where you have a ruler, you have a judge, you have an Islamic framework that permeates through all sections of society from the top down. In a society like this, there are and it's not just Islam, every society, every culture, every place on earth has its own set of rules that it's governed by, and they're put into place to safeguard the integrity and the wholeness of that particular society or that particular nation. So likewise, Islam is not any different from that. It's a form of preserving itself by doing this. What I mean here is, if George decides to stop praying, and George only prays because there's a legal obligation upon him to pray, and the call to prayer is established 5 times a day, and he goes to the mosque and he prays, right? Only because he has to. But in his own house, he doesn't pray. He doesn't do Taraweeh. He doesn't pray his 5 times prayers properly when he's at home. He's neglected this pillar. This is in the privacy of his own home. The state does not know about this. The state doesn't pry into his private affairs. That's between him and Allah. But the minute he brings this out onto the street, right now he's opened up a new innovation. He's opened up a new idea in society that there are people that can do this, right? And it only takes one person to do something before other people, it catches on with other people. Now, in a traditional society, and even now in many parts of the world, it does not matter whether a person is a criminal, whether a person is good, godly or ungodly, right? People still pray 5 times a day, right? Their sins are in their own place, but their worship is in its own place, right? And yes, worship does help you curb your sins, right? But there are people that still transgress. And you hear people sometimes saying, oh, we are better than those people who pray 5 times a day and still sin. Or you hear people saying, I'm not going to pray because I'm in need now, because it's showing hypocrisy to your Lord. Both of these statements are statements from the shaitan. Praying is in its own place. A good person should be praying 5 times a day and he doesn't fall in sin as much. And a bad person should be praying 5 times a day. The obligation is still there upon him, and he falls into sin more than the good person. But does that mean you fall into sin so you leave what's obligatory upon you and totally condemn yourself? No. In a traditional society, people would pray. Everybody would pray 5 times a day. One of my teachers used to say, even the communists in Afghanistan used to pray 5 times a day, right? So it's one of those things. And to openly leave that and to step outside in defiance and to show people, look, I'm not praying, it sets a bad precedent for everybody else. So other people can turn around and say, well, he's not praying, I'm not praying, he got away with it, I got away with it. And slowly you start to corrupt society and you break down one of the pillars of society. Likewise, the same holds true for drinking alcohol, right? The state's not going to pry on you what you do inside your house. But once you bring it out into the open, the state needs to act. Otherwise, you start to erode away, chip away at the edifice of society, culture, and your civilization. So in this situation, what does Imam Sharambululi say? He says, one who leaves the ritual prayer on purpose out of laziness is to be beaten until he bleeds and then imprisoned until he starts praying. The same ruling applies to one who does not fast in Ramadan. Though one is not killed, however, unless one denies a fard or belittles it. First of all, from the onset, if somebody does not pray, he does not lose his faith. Denying the obligation, if George turns around and says, I don't need to pray, I don't need to pray. Prayer is not for me. It's not obligatory upon me to pray anymore. It's okay. The Quran says pray, but it was for those people in the past. I'm not obliged to pray. Then there is a problem. Then you have to question George. Then he's taken in front of a panel. He's asked by the judge, right, what do you mean by this statement? And he has to clarify what his true intention was. Maybe it was the opposite of what he intended, where the opposite of what he spoke. Maybe it was exactly what he meant. And even then, it's up to the judge and the jury to decide what to do with this guy. If somebody merely says, oh, I'm lazy, I'm not going to pray Fajr, I'm going to start from tomorrow, or I'm going to start from next year, or I've got so many other things to do in my life, but he does not deny the obligation of praying. He admits the obligation is there, but he also understands that he's a weak human being. In this sense, he's a Muslim. And regardless of whether the station of someone is as an apostate or as a Muslim, there is no vigilantism in Islam, right? Nobody is judge, jury, and executioner at the same time. This is only to be done by the judge and executed by the office of virtue and vice, or whatever it may be, within an Islamic framework in an Islamic country, and they execute it within parameters that are clearly defined, right? And moving either side of them hold repercussions for the ones who are executing that on behest of the judge, who answers to the Caliphate, the Caliphate office. So there's no vigilante. Whether you're in a Muslim country today or you're in a non-Muslim country today, we are concerned with our own acts of worship. There's no vigilantism. We don't take the law into our own hands. And in fact, if somebody's not praying, it doesn't really concern me, because I'm more concerned with my own worship, my own relationship with Allah, my own shortfalls in my own worship, than worrying about if George is praying or his friend Michael is praying, right? So what the state would do is they have like measures. They encourage someone, they take them to educational classes, right? They will give them da'wah, they'll invite them into the mosque. They have various methods. If they keep breaking those contracts that have been agreed between them, right? The contracts they agreed that, okay, I will do this, I know I should have prayed, I was being a bit lazy. If they persistently break this, and then the measures get a bit more severe, to the extent that they may be beaten, right? Now, beaten sounds severe here. What kind of beaten? Again, that's discretionary ta'zir punishment as imposed and decided by the judge. It's a spectrum again. And imprisoned, right? So they could choose imprisonment, they could choose beating, whichever works for them, until he starts praying. Why is this done? As mentioned before, it's done to preserve society. We don't want people who end up creating fitna, fasad, corruption within their society by starting to do acts that chip away at the edifice of Islam. So this lends itself to the idea of teaching your children to pray and teaching everybody around you in society to pray. For example, in your own house, you pray but your wife doesn't pray, right? And you've guided her, she doesn't pray. There's nothing more that you can do. But the negative impact is that the majority of the time she will spend with your child. So as a result, there's a high possibility that your child will not learn how to pray properly, or will not follow by example, because children love to do what their parents do. And if they're in a particular environment, that's how they grow up. So there's a high likelihood that the child will not know how to pray on time, or will not be praying when he needs to pray, right? From age 7 and 10. The discipline put in place for a child is not going to be. It becomes relaxed. The whole household becomes relaxed, right? That same edifice of prayer you can put into your house. If someone isn't praying, then they're generally not going to be reading Quran every day. They're generally not going to be fasting the whole of Ramadan. They're generally not going to be doing the other things. So because prayer, as mentioned, it's the skeletal framework of the whole religion. It is the backbone. Right? After the Shahada, it is the backbone of the religion, the prayer. That's the one determining factor. I could live side by side with George, and George is of the same color as me, the same language as me, right? But how do I know he's a Muslim? You have to see the vestiges, can't get this word out, of Islam. Aside from the fact that maybe he doesn't have a beard, I don't have a beard, right? How else will you know? Right? 5 times a day there should be some clue. Maybe he doesn't use Islamic expressions. Maybe he doesn't know any. But prayer? Right? The only way I know if he's a Muslim or not, if the time for prayer comes and I say, Brother George, let's pray together. And George says no. And then maybe I'm forced to think, okay, he's missed a few prayers. He just doesn't want to pray. He hasn't even excused himself by an excuse such as sometimes people make like they feel the shame, right? They feel the shame, but he's not feeling shame or anything. So then you're forced to question. Maybe George is a Christian in my country, right? Maybe George is of another faith in my country. Maybe George is of a third faith in my country, right? So one of the primary distinctions between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is the prayer. So it's very, very important. More time has been spent on the topic of prayer in this course than any other topic. You could combine all the other topics and combine the topic of prayer, and you find the prayer to be half of everything else that you will learn in this book. So when it comes to children, Rasulullah said, command your children to pray at age 7 and strike them lightly regarding it at age 10. We mentioned in a previous lesson on how to teach your children to pray from age 7, and definitely they should be praying by repercussions if they don't pray by the age of 10. Why? Because from the age of 10, any time a woman can hit puberty, a girl can hit puberty, and even a guy. Depending on the nutrition of the guy, depending on many, many things, a guy can also hit puberty at 13, 14. So in an instant like this, they need to be ready. Your obligation as a father, your obligation as a mother, or the primary caregiver, and you will be asked about this, is did you discharge your duties, your obligations, and teach them how to pray? Once they hit puberty, then they're responsible for their own actions of praying or not praying. But as a child, prepubescent and as a child, they're your responsibility, and you will be asked for what you did or you didn't do. Right? So it's very, very important. By age 7, they should be praying. You should start teaching them. They should at least start acting out the motions with you in prayer, and slowly, slowly learn everything that you're doing. Why you bow, what to say when you bow. Is it a sunnah? When you prostrate, why you prostrate. Is it a fard? Is it a sunnah to recite? Then standing up, what do you say? So you build on it slowly, slowly. By the age of 10, they should know the prayer perfectly, and they should be praying by themselves 5 times a day. The meaning here is strike them lightly regarding it at age 10. Now we need to understand that Rasulullah was never one for violence against anybody. There are ample hadith on his mercy, on the generosity, on the extreme care he showed children, the orphans, women, and the elderly, right? The meaning here, when we say striking, it's like when you speak to a child. When you're speaking to a child, and especially like as a school teacher, right? Because this is an example, school teachers don't hit their children. So a school teacher will shout at a child, why did you not do this? Why did you not do this? And sometimes they'll tap the child. It certainly happened to me as a child. Why did you not do this? Right? To emphasize, to wake you up momentarily. Whoa, he's doing this. Why did you not pray? So it's like when you grab a child and you want them to stop something and you do this. What are you doing? You're not beating them. You're drawing their attention to something. You're drawing their attention to something that they've done wrong now, and there's a repercussion to it. Like, this shouldn't happen. So this is the beating that we're talking about here. It's not, you don't get a stick and start beating your child senseless. There's no no marks on the body, no welts, even no redness. no redness means it's not beating. It's like when you imagine getting a 10-year-old and kind of, I wouldn't even advocate this, shaking your child, no. But you can understand, you know, when you grab the arm and like a slight gentle, ever so slight gentle, just to wake them up. Somebody, if you've showed love to your child their whole life, you've showed love their whole life to the child, and then you've encouraged them to pray, and you've told them the huge importance of prayer, and then when they don't do it, and then they see you kind of poke them